So I guess we can get started. I want to save some time at the end for questions and comments. So if you want to jot down questions on your iPhone or smartphone and bring them to Summer and me at the end, just at the end while the question answered, we have plenty of time to do that, I think. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to hopefully learn as much as you can, and I can explain as much as I can within my limitations to make this an enjoyable morning and learn a lot about dogs. Derek Manov, who worked with me here at UCSB and back at USC for, I guess we can go back about 40 years, he's handing out some therapy dog cards. So if you don't get one, Derek's up here in the front at the end, and trying to see if we have any children or teenagers in the crowd. Raise your hand if you have children here. We've got a few. Okay, so I'm a little surprised for those of you who have children, teenagers down, a little door price if you like for each of you, and I'll explain what it is. You want to show them what it is? So we have, Summer and I have written 4 books together, and so I brought a few of the books here in the event that there were some people of the correct reading age to get these, but they're actually quite useful for adults as well. If you're thinking about getting a dog, especially a Great Pyrenees dog, there's a lot of information in these books that will answer a lot of questions about therapy dogs in particular. So with that, I guess we'll get started, and looking forward to a really enjoyable morning with you. So the title of our talk is Amazing Medical Scent Dogs, and the focus will be primarily on detecting COVID and some other diseases and some other things that dogs can do. So hopefully this will round out some information that you might be interested in about dogs. How many people have dogs presently? How many people have had dogs in the past but not presently? And how many people would like to have a dog? Okay. Okay, you're in the right room. And Summer is my sidekick. I'll tell you a little bit more about her, but I want to acknowledge my co-author on this particular slideshow and a peer-reviewed medical journal article that came out about a year ago and went viral. Her name is Heather Juncada, and Heather is a really operating scent dog specialist. She lives in Fort Myers, Florida, and so we have teamed up over the past 1.5 to 2 years to work on papers, and then tons of interviews and all kinds of things, press releases that have gone out about the work that we have done and others in the scent dog world, which is really catching on. So we kind of feel like we're on the leading edge of some really important work, utilizing dogs to the betterment of mankind. So this particular photo is one of Heather's little beagles, and this little guy was being deployed during a lung cancer detection research program, which was really successful. And so she's written a paper on this particular aspect before we got into the COVID together. So this is one of her little beagles. And this is Teddy. Teddy was one of our first purebred Great Pyrenees dogs, and this was taken at a therapy dog day right here, very close to where we are right now. And so we've had a lot of fun coming to campus. I'll tell you more about the details a little bit, but first of all, welcome all of you gauchos. And we are truly a gaucho family. Both of my sons, very successful sons, graduated from UCSB. One of them is here today. And so I'm very proud of them. And we've had a wonderful time teaching and doing research at UCSB. I retired just a few years ago. I came down with cancer, which is fortunately in remission. And so I had to retire a few years ago. But I've remained really active, and my switch in research areas has gone from oceanography into dogology. I've got to say, I love oceanography, but I really love dogology. It's the best. It absolutely is the best. Okay, so this is Summer. Summer is a Great Pyrenees dog, and she has ancestors. See if we can get this. Yeah, she has ancestors in Basque Country. Everybody know where the Basque Country is?
Spain.
Yeah, between France and Spain in a mountainous area. And it's a very small region of the world, but it's a really interesting place. And that's where these dogs have come from. They are still being used in Basque Country for livestock guardian dogs. And so in particular, my friend and I have traveled up there to see these dogs in action. And maybe you've probably heard of the Tour de France. When you watch the Tour de France bike race going on, you'll see these dogs. And one time we were up there completely surrounded by all kinds of sheep, probably at least 100 sheep. One of these dogs, all by itself, was taking this whole flock of sheep up the mountain as we were going up there. And I love the part that when we were going through, we had to kind of drive and make our way through these. I look back, and there's one sheep which is a straggler. And lo and behold, this Great Pyrenees dog ran back. It wasn't going to lose anybody. They are extraordinarily wonderful, loyal dogs, and they protect their flocks to the bitter end, like you meet the bitter end. No coyotes or wolves will mess with these guys, including bears, I should say, as well. So that's where they come from, and you'll still see these dogs working in fields in California, Idaho, and some other states as well. And if you ever see them, don't approach them because they're on their job and they're doing what they need to do. And they don't know you from a bear. So you want to leave them alone when they're having a dog. That's just a little tip. About Summer, she's had 9 puppies. She has 15 American Kennel Club titles, ranging from conformation, because she looks pretty, all the way up to performance, where she does obedience and rally competition. But the big thing that we're most into is therapy dog activities. And so she's won many titles and awards for the work that she has done. Our books are in all 250 children's hospitals across the United States. And so these are the 4 books, and the one that's especially devoted to her is the one up in the upper left. But probably the most stories about UCSB are in the one on the right. And I served in the Coast Guard for 4 years, so I got the bright idea of writing a book about Great Pyrenees and Newfoundlands at a lighthouse in around 1900, when kind of the peak time of lighthouses. So that's what the 2 lower books are here, shown here. Okay, she's been on TV. CBS has done specials on her. She's been in the LA Times, and she's been an internet celebrity since I used her to demonstrate how COVID sniffing dogs work. So her pictures appear all over the world, actually. So she's very famous, and I like to tell people that we've received more hits on our publications from the COVID paper than all my others combined. There's a lot of papers. I've read 180 papers. So, but this particular paper about the dogs really hit the key moments. So, and presently she's nominated to be the top therapy dog in the United States by the American Kennel Club. So she's quite a special dog. And at the end, I invite you to come up and pet her and have some fun with her. So she's used in a lot of my illustrations. Since she's here and she loves to be with people, she's my little sidekick for the day. Okay, therapy dogs. Now, a lot of people ask questions about therapy dogs, and do they really work? What's really going on with these therapy dogs? And so there's been a lot of scientific research which is now showing that, in fact, they increase a human's hormones, oxytocin, and decrease the cortisol hormone, which the net effect of the balance of that comes out that it reduces stress, anxiety, depression, and blood pressure. So these are actual tests that people have done. So when you start feeling good, it's real. It's not mental. It's your body is actually changing in response to being able to pet these dogs. So they're quite amazing. Sometimes they're actually used to help people after heart surgery. A lot of different things that they're utilized for. A little tidbit, I don't know if you know how much cognitive power these dogs have, but the average dog can actually recognize 200 words. And so when I'm training her to do obedience and rally, I catch myself not using enough words because she understands. She's got quite a vocabulary that she can really understand. And one particular scientist using a border collie actually taught his dog 1,000 words. So it's kind of the cognitive power of a 2 or 3-year-old human being. So it's really amazing what they can do, and we way underestimate them in many ways. That's one of the themes of the talk today, about how we are underestimating these guys. Just a few pictures here. This is what my life looked like when I was teaching here at UCSB. For the last 10 years, we got into doing the therapy dog activities. So the dogs came to class with me, Teddy, Lincoln, and Summer, and then previously I had 2 others as well. So we had quite a good group of Great Pyrenees who would come to class, and we used to give awards for students that had done well on their exams, and you can see the dogs like to do that. One day we had this huge surf skateboard. Surf skateboard came into class. I said, we got to get a picture of this. So that's Lincoln with the surfboard. Okay, one of the things that we continue to do, even though I'm not actively teaching here on a regular basis at UCSB, is to do therapy dog days. And we have therapy dog days each quarter just before finals, and Summer, as well as my previous dogs, and several others, probably up to 40 or 50 therapy dogs come on campus for the students to pet and just relax and enjoy. And so this has been going on for quite a long time. In fact, there are 2 big banners that they put up for those days, and those banners have a picture of Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln is kind of immortalized here in a lot of ways. So that's Lincoln right there on Therapy Dog Day. So you can see the many happy faces that arise when we bring the dogs to campus. Beyond just the happy days, there are also sad days that the dogs get involved in a lot of events as well. One of these occurred in 2013 at Princeton University, which is my PhD alma mater, and UCSB were struck by a very rare form of meningitis. And they had to find an experimental vaccine to stop this. It was a very, very bad outbreak that was going on. So Princeton found this, made a connection and got it, and then Chancellor Yang very quickly contacted Princeton and asked them how they did it, and he was able to get the vaccine on our campus. So that's step 1. Step 2, how do you get people to take the vaccine? They're all kind of averse-taking vaccines for the most part, I would say. So what they did, the Student Health Services asked me to bring my dogs to campus. And so they advertised the dogs coming to campus in the campus newspaper, 93106, and telling the students that come and get your shots and you can pet Teddy, Lincoln, and Summer. So we did that, and we had a remarkable turnout. In fact, many students came, and they said, I wouldn't have come if it wasn't for the dogs. So we actually really met a lot of students. They were very appreciative that I had brought the dogs to campus. The other thing that has happened a lot is that in Southern California, we've had a lot of tragedies. And so we go to a lot of memorials. There have been shootings, as you know, the Borderline nightclub shooting not that long ago. And there have been other very negative things that have happened. And when those do happen, my dogs and I, we go to the site and we offer our comfort to those people. So we've been doing that for quite a long time. So yeah, a lot of different memorials, school shootings, the Saugus shooting about a year ago or a year and a half ago. We participated in that, and she actually appeared in a video memorializing that particular situation. So we're there when people are in the most difficult times. So just to give an idea that we love to do it when people are always happy and everything's going good. That we're there for people when things aren't going so well for them. Okay, so now to today's talk. That was kind of a long introduction. Sorry about that. But I did want you to understand a little bit about summer of my Great Pyrenees dogs. So the idea of this talk is to increase your knowledge, appreciation, and enjoyment of dogs. And obviously, almost everybody here is really into dogs in one form or another. And hopefully, by the end of the talk, you will learn some things about dogs that you might not have known before and can carry those forward to better understand your dogs. So just to give you a quick example of something to think about is walking your dog. Very simple, right? So how do we walk our dogs? We usually walk our dogs like where we want to go, at the pace we want to go. Well, to a dog, that's like putting blinders on it because you're not allowing the dog to sniff and smell. So its most important attribute in terms of a sense is smell. So occasionally think about letting your dog lead the walk instead of you leading the walk. So I'll talk more about this, and I think you'll get the message a little bit later as to why that is scientifically. Okay, so the first part, we're going to just talk about senses, just a little bit of the basic science of how senses work. I'll tell you a little bit about the background of medical scent dogs. And medical scent dogs, you can really kind of trace back about 30 years when people started noticing that there's something special about dogs and doing detecting diseases, all kinds of diseases. So I'll spend a little time on that. And I'll focus primarily on the COVID scent dog work, which has been going on for about the past 2 or 3 years or so, and kind of where we're at with that. And then the final part is the technology part. And this is where my oceanographic background and my dogology background come together, because when I was doing oceanography, one of our big things was to develop new sensors to better understand the ocean, getting more variables, understanding how relationships occur between the physics, biology, and chemistry of the ocean. So that last part is the tech work, if you like. I think it's fascinating to you. And then we'll give you conclusions at the very end. Okay, for a little audience participation, we're going to go through the 5 senses. So I've taken this little cartoon and put some numbers to help us work our way through. We're going to talk about these different senses. So, number 1, ears, hearing. Number 2, sight. Number 3, taste. Number 4, smell. This is the hard one. Number 5, touch. Right, so those are the 5 senses. So those are the 5 senses. There are actually some other senses as well that are recognized in the scientific literature and are key to understanding other aspects of the way we work with the environment and interact with the environment. So there are others. Balance is considered a sense. Body spatial orientation, like when you do a spin, a flip. I kind of like to think of cats. The way cats, you could end up landing on their feet. That's a good example of body spatial orientation. And there's some others as well. But we're going to focus on these 5, which are most familiar today. And so for humans, what do you think is your most important sense? Sight. Yeah, probably most people would argue that sight is our most important, followed by hearing. And then we don't think so much about smell, taste, and touch. That's an important aspect because our brains are focusing in on sight and hearing, but we're not very good at smell, it turns out. Not as good as other animals, especially dogs. So that's kind of the deal. So sight is the one for humans. What about for dogs? The 5, smell. Smell is the key one, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time on today. But the others are also very, very important, and I want to touch on those as well. They have bearing on the way dogs see their world and the way they interact with everybody else in the world and each other. So just to break it down, this is a really, really simple explanation for what a sense is. But a sense is basically providing us information about our environment through a biological system so that we can act on it. And so I use the sight example here. In this case, the signal is sunlight striking the human eye. So the signal is the sunlight. The collecting apparatus for our body is basically the eyeball. And then we have the transduction process, which is basically having neuron cells that carry information from the eye onto the brain where it can be processed. So transduction is a very, very important part, and when we talk about neurology, neurons, that work really began in the early 1900s to develop how the neurons work and how neurology works. Then we get to the brain, and this is where the processing happens. And so this is what I call a biological neural network. Now, neural networks and artificial intelligence are in the common language today. So you hear about these all the time, and some of you probably researchers in the area that utilize these as well. So this is a biological neural network, and I think even in the literature that I've been reviewing and the work that I've been doing, it's kind of an underestimate of the importance of how good the dog's neural network operates. So I'll talk a bit about that a little bit later on, and then after processing it then turns it into action. So Summer sees a smile on somebody's face, sight, probably gets a nice smell, she runs up to you, and she's ready for a pet. So in a sense, that's the whole process right there. It's signal all the way to some action. So in her action, she's always looking for a pet. Okay, some basic questions that you might wonder about. One is, how many dogs are there in the world? And this is a very, very hard thing to determine. But there are estimates of 500 million to 1 billion dogs in the world. That's a huge number. The counting process is certainly not very clear how you can do that, but there have been attempts. So up to 1 billion dogs in the world. So that means if there are 7.8 million people in the world, 1 in 8 people has a dog. So there are a lot of dogs out there in the world. So why are their dogs so different? Why does Summer look so different from a Chihuahua or from a Great Dane? It's breeding. And this makes, in terms of scientific terms, a very interesting proposition, because now that we have all the genetic DNA work that has been done and is continuing to be done, we have a really good opportunity to learn a lot about genetic diversity and how diseases develop, et cetera, et cetera. So dogs are a really good model. And so having these different dogs is one really positive thing. So why are they different? Because they're different breeds, they're bred to do different kinds of things. So just looking at the noses, and we're going to focus a lot on noses today. There's the collie with a nice long nose. This is a Boston Terrier, kind of a pug-type nose. This is a, let's see, this, oh, help me out here. It looks like a greyhound. It could be a greyhound, or it might also be a different breed. I'm sure. But anyway, and then you see the German Shepherd up here. Notice how their ears are different, and these are pretty remarkable in terms of both their ears and their noses. So why have they ended up this way? Because they've been bred for special functions. They're working dogs or pleasure dogs in the case of the little lap dogs, but they're bred for specific purposes, whether it's herding, guarding, smelling, trying to find out where people are, or prey maybe. So they're all kind of tuned in to different things. So there are 200 AKC breeds which are recognized worldwide. There are probably close to 500 to count all around the world. So a lot of different breeds that are out there, all serving different kinds of functions. Now, what about their hearing? It's been a little bit of time in their hearing. They can hear 5 times better than we can. But one of the things they can do is to move their ears around, especially if you watch a German Shepherd and you're sitting there, before it even turns its head, it's likely it's moving its ears around like antennae. So they actually have a lot of muscles that are devoted for moving the ears around. They can hear sounds very, very far away, probably a mile or more, and they can hear very high frequencies. So the herding dogs, like the border collies, respond to a very high-pitched whistle that even we can't hear, because it's out of our hearing range. So the range of hearing capabilities for these dogs are remarkable. They can distinguish different sounds as well. It's like they've got a little spectral analysis system with their hearing. And so as an example, let's say you're driving your car into your driveway coming home, and your neighbor is coming in a little later. Well, your dog's going to hear yours first because it's tuned in. It's like a radio station. It tunes into that frequency. Your neighbors, not so much, because neighbor's not going to run over to the trees, right? So, yeah, so they're able to respond to different frequencies extremely well. Okay, sight. This is one that has a lot of confusion associated with it. In terms of how well they can see compared to us, they have 20/75 visual acuity. Perfect is 20/20 with humans, as you know. Some are better, some are worse. So for day vision, they're not typically not quite as good as humans on average, but they can still distinguish a caretaker 1,600 to 2,000 feet. So what they can't do during the day, they more than make up for at night. They have spectacular night vision. And so their night vision is remarkable. And so we've had a lot of discussions over the years talking about when our dogs are picking up the sight of another dog at nighttime. And it turns out that dogs have more rods in their eyes than humans do. And those rods are really good at picking up, collecting the light. So lots of rods is a good thing. They have fewer cones, which is a disadvantage for color, which I'll mention in a minute. And in addition, they actually have a membrane behind the eyeball called the templetum lucidum, which basically is reflecting light back in. It's like a mirror. So they're capturing even more photons than a human can, because we don't have that capability of having that little screen back there to reflect the photons back in. So they're phenomenal at night vision, it turns out. They also have something called very fast flicker rate. And the way the flicker rate works is the way your eye is collecting the data. It's actually doing it at a high frequency, but the dogs do it at a much higher frequency, it turns out. That's one of the reasons dogs are so good at catching frisbees. Okay? You throw a ball in the air or a frisbee, the dog's all over it, and you go, wow, that's pretty amazing. It's probably due to the flicker rate. So that's another thing. Peripheral vision are usually better, but it depends on the individual dog. Like this borzoi you see here is a side hound, and the ears are basically on the sides, so obviously they can see the sides very well, but then they lose out on the depth perception, because you're better off with your eyes being closer together. So Lincoln shown here, my Great Pyrenees, and this little dog here, also kind of looking forward. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of the dogs, and again, it varies on the basis of the breed. Finally, color. This is one that most people don't know too much about. Well, we have vision that takes us from the blue into the red, and we have three types of cones, whereas the dogs only have 2 types of cones. And so what we think the dogs are seeing in terms of color runs from kind of light blue or gray on out to here. So it's much more limited, but they can see things. So one of the tricks people like to play is throwing a red ball. Will the dog follow a red ball? Not as well as it would a yellow ball. It will probably pick it up for other reasons. So the dog's view of the world in terms of color is more limited from what we can see. Okay, I like this little example. This is Summer's favorite massage therapist. And so when we go to dog shows, this lady often shows up, and Summer gets a massage. So besides finding predators and all of that, there's a pleasure part of this too, and they really communicate with each other. So during the massage, you'll watch them like gazing back. But they use multimodality, so all the 5 senses that we've talked about, they use in some way in just about everything that they do, which is great. And we do the same thing, but the dogs really take advantage of it in a big way. But as opposed to a big problem for me, I've been consulting with the National Geographic program. They're trying to put together a series of movies that will be about the farm that's in Northern California, something called the Biggest Little Farm, Biggest Little Farm. Some of you might remember it. If you haven't, you might see it on a replay on the TV, on an airplane flight. But in any case, it's pretty interesting. A couple decided they were going to be gentleman, lady farmers in Moore Park, kind of like Green Acres for the older people in the crowd. Younger people will not know what this is. But anyway, they're like Green Acres in a modern setting. And so they asked me a few basic questions. Well, how far away can a Great Pyrenees see a coyote? So, okay, we'll think about that. And how far away can the Great Pyrenees hear a coyote? Okay, think about that one. And how far away could they smell a coyote? Well, it sounds like you set up an experiment, shouldn't be too hard, but the problem is that they're using all the roads. So you can't blindfold the dog, cover up its ears, and just let it smell. So that's a problem. It's a fundamental problem of research that I've been wrestling with. I still have to go and do some experiments at this farm in Moore Park with the Great Pyrenees who live there. So anyway, that's the confusing part of it, but it's all wonderful, and they utilize all of these in their world. Okay, now we get to the sense of smell, which is the key topic here. So the dogs have basically very large heads with a large portion of the head devoted to the nose. Okay, so I'm going to turn around here, show your big nose. There you go. So they have big noses, and this particular image shows Summer's nose, just the black portion of it, and they're very different from our noses. We inhale and exhale from our nostrils. In, out. 2 holes, right? Dogs don't do it that way. The dogs take it in and to the front, and then they have flaps on the side. So when you pet her, take a good look at her nose, and you'll see her little flaps on the side. That's where the air goes out. So it's like a flow-through system instead of in and out system, which is very efficient, ventilating and collecting the smells. So that's one of the key things. And of course, a lot of their brain is devoted to processing this information. They actually have special organs. They're called the vomeronasal organ, VNO for short. And we now think that they might be able to pick up the smell of viral proteins. Now, most of the smelling activity that is going on now with the scent dogs I'm going to talk to you about is actually not smelling the viral part, but rather it's kind of a mucus area that part of, it's got to be a liquid that then goes into an air form, things we associate with volatile organic compounds. And so the volatile organic compounds are what they're sniffing. So it's a smell associated with any disease. COVID, could be many other diseases as well. And so these molecules they're able to pick up and process. And so that's a really key part of this. And so they also have 2 special compartments for their intake system, if you like. They have a breathing part, which is basically just taking the oxygen to live. But they have another passage which is devoted to smelling. And so they have a very special area which is bringing in the smell itself, and then they can ruminate on the smell and then do whatever they want. They're basically using it. So this is the beginning of a smelling machine. In addition, there are several distinguishing factors between humans and dogs. Dogs have 1,100 smelling genes, whereas we only have 800. Not a huge difference, but enough. In terms of the olfactory receptor cells, they have 20 times as many as humans. So it's a huge number of these cells which are made available just for smelling. So this is the reason their world is a smelling world, ours is a sight world. So they have phenomenal sensitivity, at least 100,000 times better than what we can smell. And again, like the hearing, as I was describing before, in spectral analysis sense, they can tell the difference in different components that are in whatever they're trying to smell. My friend Heather, she likes to use spaghetti as an example. A dog walks into a room, it smells spaghetti, but not only like us smelling, hey, there's spaghetti in the room, the dog is saying,
Oh, and here are the ingredients, I'll tell you the ingredients. This is what they're using. They're using basil, they're using this, they're using a sauce this, that, and that. I can tell you, it's got an amazing spectral analysis technique which they're just inherently able to do. And I'm going to come back to that in the technology section again. Okay, examples of scent dogs. Lots of examples. 50,000 police dogs in the United States, 1,000 military dogs. Just in the COVID world, there are 25 countries who are deploying these dogs in one way or another in terms of COVID research or in the field actually doing COVID work. So we have all kinds of things they can do, contraband. And I just found this particular illustration. People always ask me, well, don't you mask the dogs to make sure that they are not taking in some ill effect or going to have ill effects from some nasty disease which is out there. In the cases generally no, COVID and most other diseases, they're able to sense the smell. And even if they did touch it, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. However, now that we have the fentanyl problem, people are stepping back and saying, if this dog touches, even touches, it's a little smidgen of fentanyl on it, it could kill the dog. So that's the reason for this fentanyl mask that you see up here on this German Shepherd. So lots of other things they do. We're going to focus on the biomedical today. And just to let you know the other things. So how does this all begin? The scent training is actually fairly simple. Oops, I went back there. You do that. It's fairly simple. We call it the three-cup experiment. And I use Lincoln and Summer in this illustration here. And this actually came out of a library program that we do for the Los Angeles Public Library. And I decided we should teach kids how dogs are capable of smelling things and how they're different from us. And out of that program, I did a video of my dogs doing the three-cup experiment. The three-cup experiment is like the old shell game, some of you might have heard of, where you place 3 cups, place one treat under only one of the cups. Okay, so you take a human being walking up to it, they're going to miss most of the time. Our chances are 1 in 3. The dogs never miss. Why? They smell through the cup. So through their smell, they never miss. They're perfect at the shell game. And so that's when it kind of all begins. And so what we do is to pair a treat with whatever an odor may be. Let's say it's a COVID odor, which has been taken from a sweat sample when you have like a gauze with a little bit of sweat from somebody who's COVID positive. So you put that and the treat together, and the dogs gradually get weaned away from the treat, and they're still associating the treat with the COVID sample, if you like, and until such time that no more treats at the source, but as soon as the dog hits on the COVID sample, the positive COVID sample, it gets a reward. And that's how the system works. So all the things I'm going to be showing you today basically work on that general principle of the three-cup experiment. Okay, this is an example of a diabetical scent dog in a setup where there are 3 different containers here. Usually there are quite a few more, and only one of the 3 will have a COVID positive sample in it. And the samples can be breath, sweat, saliva, nasal swab, urine, or blood. Typically, the work that's being done now is utilizing sweat and breath. Typically, that's enough for the dog to pick up on it. And occasionally, some people use saliva as well. And on the right, it shows you the deployment methods which are being used for these particular COVID detection experiments, and actually practice, I should say, because it's happening at airports in some places. So the top one, the dog looks like all of these stands. They have potentially a COVID positive sample, and they will just sit there, or they will stand right in front of them, won't move. They identify it, and then they get a treat. A second way that is being done is to basically smell the odor associated with COVID through a screen. So in this particular case, there's a fan blowing, dogs on the opposite side of the screen so that people really don't come in contact with the dog. So the smell comes through, the dog senses it, and then the dog will sit if it's a positive hit on it. And the last way is, it's been used quite a bit and being used at airports. It's just smelling the people. It's also been used at a Miami Heat basketball game, and then Heather has done a lot of big concerts where this is the method that she has used. Okay, you probably know more about COVID and don't want to hear about COVID anymore, but just to put it in perspective, the numbers are pretty huge, and the importance of what COVID activities have been in the world, and these numbers are very, very arguable. But in any case, they're large. Estimated 633 million people infected worldwide, deaths 6 to 8 million, and infected in the United States, 100 million with 1.1 million deaths. And the only point I want to get across is that the numbers are huge, no matter how you take it, but they're probably not very exact either. What is being counted as a COVID death may not have been primarily a COVID death. And the number for China is striking. They claim only a little over 5,000 deaths in China. So, you take China and another 100, probably at least another 1 point something million to it. It's a large number. So there's a lot of controversy with COVID, I totally understand, and that's not the reason I'm here to get into all of that, but rather to focus on what these dogs are capable of doing now and in the future. Okay, this is a curve that, we can kind of talk about it, but this is a nice illustration about how the concentration of COVID, or what we call the load, occurs in time. And so it begins pretty quickly, peaks out, and then kind of dies out. And this is kind of a time scale that some of you are probably very familiar with. My tail went out here about 17 days when I had it. And so that's kind of the idea. But the main point of this is sensitivity. What does it take to pick it up? So the test that most of us have been taking is a rapid antigen test, which you can get in the mail from the government or pick up at a drugstore. And so you can see this curve here. It's not as accurate or sensitive as the PCR. The RT-PCR was the standard, and it probably still remains the standard for testing, but it takes some time to come back. So where are the dogs on this? We don't really have this line defined specifically yet, but it's determined through a lot of the work that it looks like it's much more sensitive than any of these, which raises an important question, whether somebody is asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic, or symptomatic. It turns out that dogs look like they are doing all the three, whereas for the other tests, you already have to be expressing some symptom along the way. So being pre-symptomatic means that you can catch people before the COVID actually really takes over. So this is still, again, in the test phase, experimental phase, but that looks like the way it's going. So testing, I think everybody pretty much agrees, is important. There's just a few points here. We still need to identify the mutations and the variants. Vaccines are still being tested. A lot of nations have gone to the dogs because of the fact they couldn't afford or were not able to get the antigen test, even the antigen test they couldn't get. So when I say that there are 23 countries that are involved in the dog work, this is one of the big stimulations, is that they can train dogs to do this, whereas they don't have the resources to do the others. And a lot of people do not want to be vaccinated. Okay, I think we're ready for the video. And this video is actually taken as an excerpt from a University of California TV lecture that Heather and I put together a few months ago, a year ago, I guess now. And so the dogs you're going to see in here are the COVID sniffing dogs of Heather Cicada. And I will point out, while thinking about it, why does she use beagles? She uses beagles because not only do they have a really great sense of smell, but they have a lot of drive, and they don't wear out quick. Whereas some of the other dogs that you'll see, like the German Shepherds, Malinois, Labradors, they're good, they're really good, but they tend to tire out much quicker and don't want to keep doing the job. like a good old beagle does. So let's see if we can sound one here in a second. So this is one of her beagles, and she's in Fort Myers, Florida.
I had been doing therapy dog works, actually beginning back at UCSB over a decade ago. So that kind of piqued my interest of how dogs smell and how they are so much better and why they're so much better than humans. How can a dog do better than a room full of scientific equipment? And so that kind of launched me into really getting into the science of the sense of smell. I started doing a really, really intense literature search to find who was doing what and is it really working. And so we found 4 different studies which were in medical journals, really good research in France, Germany, Colombia, and the United Kingdom. The dogs were basically doing work which was equivalent to the RT-PCR and antigen tests, which means about 95% accuracy. But that certainly gave us the indication that the dogs are capable of detecting pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic, and symptomatic forms of COVID in individuals.
I had started working with dogs with biological scent detection, back in 2015. I started a company, we were doing research to see if dogs could identify biomarkers for cancer. I had previously sold a few dogs to the Department of Agriculture, and those dogs were trained to detect swine flu. And so I was like, I know that they can be trained on some viruses. So then I started setting up the study protocols to do a little pilot study to see if the dogs were able to detect COVID. And the first pilot study was a huge success, and so we were really excited and then started moving forward. Depending on the specific dog, but kind of an overall average, they're sitting above 95% accuracy rate. It's a very strong signature odor in COVID, so they can pick it out very easily. If COVID, continues to be a problem throughout the next several years, I think we'll see more and more dogs. And hopefully we'll get to the point where we can have them in schools as well and really protecting the communities. If we can protect the kids and make people safe to go back to work and be in a regular work environment as opposed to have to work from home. I think, that's the end goal.
Okay, so final phase, hanging in there with me, thank you for being so patient, is about the technology. So, one of the arguments against these dogs is that it takes so many dogs to really get deeply into the problem of doing detection. So one of the areas that the dogs are being used for is to basically develop technologies that may be placed on very small kind of a sensor. So with that in mind, this is what I call biomimicry, or reverse engineering, if you like. And the basic idea has been done, has been applied for helicopter design. How does a hummingbird fly? So the design of helicopters, they utilize that. In terms of oceanography, sharks are very, very efficient swimmers. And so they've examined the skins of sharks, and so they've actually mimicked what the sharks look like in terms of their aerodynamic, hydrodynamics, and the reducing drag reduction way of doing this with the way their skin is designed. And finally, our final example, desalination. We all know that camels can go long distances without getting external water. And so they have a system that is very, very good for designing desalination plants. So these are just 3 examples. Okay, back to our problem. We've got the dog's nose, we've got the dog's brain, trying to figure out what the smells are. And in fact, Alexander Graham Bell, back in the 1800s, pointed out to scientists, basically challenged scientists, if you can figure out how smell works, you've got a really, really good thing going on. So even back then, the idea for something called electronic nose was being forwarded by Alexander Graham Bell. So we've got the dog's nose we talked about, we've got the phenomenal brain, and then Here we've got a lab full of mass spectrometers and gas chromatographs. What are they trying to do? What the dog does. It's very hard. It takes a room full of these to even come close, and they still aren't as good as the dog. So far, I've seen one estimate of $17 billion have been devoted to developing e-noses to be equivalent to what a dog can do. So we can't obviously have these very expensive and complex instruments being used all the time. So the idea is how can we miniaturize that, figure out other ways to do this. And so this little diagram is basically showing what the dog does. It's got the nose, it's got this phenomenal biological neural network, and then in terms of what man can do, or humans can do, sensor array going into data analysis, and in this case, neural networks, artificial neural networks, trying to basically duplicate what the dog's brain can do. So the dog's brain is phenomenal, still much better at processing information as a biological neural network than what anybody has come up with so far. I present this last example as the one that is most advanced in terms of taking what the dog can do and putting it into a system whereby it's maybe possible to develop an e-nose. And this was done as an example with prostate cancer, which is the second leading cause of death of men. 1 in 9 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so this particular study is coming out of England, and it's being done by a really important group in England, which is working on a lot of other things. But basically what they're trying to do is to have the dogs teach the neural network what the signal is for the particular disease that you're interested in. So it goes back to this very simple diagram up here, and what the dog is basically trying to do in this context is to teach these, teach the neural network how is this going to work. So getting the sensors that are going to be tuned in to key in on the disease of interest. It could be COVID, it could be Parkinson's, it could be, in this case, they're working on the prostate cancer. So that's what they're trying to do, is to tie these together to make the dogs really the big research tool. So where does all of this go? Well, some of this stuff is already available in terms of wearable sensors or smartwatches, which some of you probably have. And if anybody is a type 2 diabetic, you may wear the sensor that's in the upper left corner there. So basically take a small sample of blood in that case, or it could be sweat, it could be saliva, different ways that these devices can be worn as patches. And so this work is developing very fast. Some really interesting work at UC San Diego is being done with a patch which looks something like this. So the future could well be that these e-noses will be tuned in for diseases as well as the basic things like blood pressure, oxygen, etc. So that's hopefully where we're going to go. Finally, conclusions. Okay, finally, the dog senses are generally better than the humans. And I would add to that in terms of scent and smell, there are extremely highly developed neural networks which go way beyond what our brain can do. Obviously, we have a phenomenal biological neural network, but in terms of smell, the dogs have it. They can provide non-intrusive, very quick response and highly accurate screening for COVID. One group has just come out looking at long COVID. They're good at that too, and many other diseases I mentioned before. And then the final point is about what I just spoke about with the wearable biosensors, e-noses, etc. So what are our challenges? Well, first of all, acceptance. For a doctor to be told that the dog is better at diagnosing than he or she may be is kind of a hard sell. And so, with that in mind, basically the way our scientific system works is that you have to produce results, publish them in the scientific literature, gain acceptance, and then after a while, just maybe they might get adopted. And we're now at the stage where we're getting a lot more papers into the literature. As I indicated earlier here, a year or so ago, we only had 4 papers that had come out before ours that were really dedicated to this and were demonstrating the great possibilities. So we have to get through that hurdle. We also have to get through the governmental agencies. Governmental agencies are very careful about what they approve, and obviously they don't want the public to have issues with, well, dog safety. It wasn't a scientific instrument, it wasn't a mass spectrometer, it was a darn dog. So in a sense, the dog has done us a big favor in terms of the research world for medical dogs. So there's a lot more literature which is coming out, publications through the referee literature, which are starting to come out. So that's the positive side of that aspect. Okay, so I always like to leave people with homework, if you like, if you're really interested. Some books to take a look at. The one on the left is the one that's dedicated totally to medical scent dogs. Dr. Dogs by Maria Goodhage. And then my favorite author, Alexandra Horowitz from Bernard College. She's been writing books for some time. Some of you may have read some of her books. And they're really amazing books. She's a journalist, writer, author, very knowledgeable. She did her PhD at UC San Diego. And so she's been working on cognitive science and focused on dogs. She's done a tremendous job doing that. Okay, and let's see, finally, there's a podcast that just came out within the last couple of weeks about my dogs and me. And so it's called The Third Pod from the Sun. And the name of it is Ocean Sensors and Dog Centers. And I don't expect you to remember all this, but you can reach me at this email address, or if you just put into your website, Tommy, UCSD, dogs. Oh my. I have probably 20 lectures, which are like this one, on my site, ranging from all different kinds of things, real popular kinds of science things about the ocean, on up through the dogs, and just a variety of things. So if you're interested in this, you go to my website and look at the talks, and you'll see a lot of talks which are like this one. So I think that's pretty much what we're going to do. And as you talk to the heads, we'll be happy to try to answer any questions, and certainly happy to hear any comments that you all may have.